Matthew 10:34 through 36 from the Bible, Jesus says, "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be the members of his own household." According to many religious-based websites and articles, this Bible verse is conveying that Jesus was sent to earth to encourage people to follow God, and that in order to do so properly, they might have to turn their backs on their loved ones. The ones who don't believe anyway. However, religions rooted in Christianity also insist that Jesus was a peaceful person sent to earth to show us how much God loves us and to spread the word of God. How is it that the same person who literally says in this Bible verse that he was not sent to earth to bring peace can also be revered as a universal symbol of peace and love? How can someone who encouraged the abandonment of familial relationships in order to focus on God also be credited with teaching us all to love thy neighbor? Was Jesus actually a beacon of peace and love? Or was he sent here to punish those who chose not to believe the things that God, or he claimed that God wanted us to follow, and he was sent to teach us? Are you a religious person who wants to share your thoughts on who Jesus was and why he actually might have been sent to earth? Our phone lines are open. Give us a call because our show is starting now. Hello, welcome everybody. Today is February 23rd, 2025. I am your host, Sydney Davis Jr., and joining me are Objectively Dan and Ben. How are you gentlemen doing today? What's new? What's going on?
Doing all right, Sydney. It's great. We're all wearing black today. That was purely by coincidence, but we do look like we're part of a metal band. And
from mime group.
I think it's cool. I'm enjoying it. So how about you, Ben? How you doing?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the shirt color is more evidence that Sydney and I are siblings.
Right.
We won't reveal the answer to the poll question. So you all gotta speculate more, I guess. Right. Because we're not going to tell you.
I just want to point out the choice of the word, the use of brothers instead of siblings was originally a faux pas on my part, but now I chose. It's an editorial decision at this point. So, leave your answer in the poll, in the poll, and tell us what you think if they are in fact brothers.
If you think so, call in. If you don't think so, call in. Because Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 not-for-profit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines, so get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. A way to support us is by sending super chats. If we get, what's a good number? What's a good number of super chats?
10 super chats.
There we go. If we get 10 super chats, we will tell you if Ben and I are brothers. We'll reveal the answer. If we don't get 10 super chats, we won't tell you.
We had to do some ancestry.com to figure some stuff out, but we have an answer, I think, right? So
I think so.
Yeah.
I tried to call my mom about it, but she didn't pick up the phone. So
yeah, adding to the mystery, I think.
And then Ben's like, I too tried to call my mom, and she didn't pick up the phone. Wait a second. Wait
a minute. What's her number? What's your number?
Yeah, I did whole genetic testing just to answer this question.
Right.
So.
They gave away their personal information to a corporation and agreed to God knows what for them to do with that information just so we could for content, baby. That's it.
We're committed.
Yeah.
Do it for the bit.
The most unethical contract for personal information you've ever seen. They signed it. They read those terms. They hit agree. Okay. So it's happening.
Check that little box. I do agree. I would like emails and text. Thank you.
Yeah. Just use my DNA for all kinds of experiments, whatever. Make clones. They're sure.
That's the one thing I've never had to worry about is whether or not they're going to clone me. Because they're just not. They're not going to do it. They're going to take one look at the original and be like, no, thanks. We're good. That's the one thing I've never been worried about is whether or not they're going to clone me. Yeah.
What use could they use of you, Sydney? I guess, I don't know. Yeah.
They're like a second one. We're still trying to kill the first weed. What are you talking about?
See, they don't want any of the three of us, because then it would just make more atheists, and they don't want that.
That's also true. Yeah.
Right. They're like, an army of atheists with ADHD. Miss me. Thank you. Miss me with that one.
What productive use to society would we provide? Absolutely nothing.
Right. We're here to champion for atheism, but first I need to Google Queen Rania of
If
Iran,
anything, we would
curious.
further inflate the market of call-in shows on YouTube. Like, it would be even way more shows than now.
They're like, saturate YouTube with these guys? No thanks.
Yeah.
No thanks. All right. It is time for our Talk Heathen to Me segment, where we get into the question of the week. Last week, we asked you, how did Noah keep the animals in line? Before I get to the top 3 answers, gentlemen, how did Noah keep the animals in line, in your opinions?
Well, Ben has a great answer for this, I'm sure. Ben. And I'm not just thinking about this right now because I didn't look at it.
It's not totally the fact that we have a vegan here with us, but definitely threat of eating them.
Yeah. That could definitely. I was imagining whips of some kind, but then like, what scenario am I going with? Because if we're talking about Noah was with the dinosaurs, I don't know how that worked. Maybe it's like the story of the grandma who swallowed a fly or whatever. Maybe it's one of those situations where you get the smallest animals on board first, and then progressively you get the bigger ones because they're like chasing the smaller ones, and it makes like a line. I don't know. That's my idea.
Somebody in the chat said we better make it good because they're missing Looney Tunes for this. So you better make it good. Your answers better be good.
Looney Tunes? That's been on for like 100 years. What do you mean? What do you mean you're missing it? You can go back.
Original reruns of Looney Tunes for this? First of all, where? So the top 3 answers to that question from last week were: number 3, Miranda Rensberger said, Noah kept the animals in line by threatening to sing worship music to them or at them. I like that. Is true. You know, if somebody threatened me, if they were like, if you don't stop talking, I'm going to sing Jesus Loves the Little Children, I would shut the fuck up. I'm just going to be honest with you. Did I say that too soon?
I'll leave the room. I'll be like, no, thanks. Bye.
Yeah. No, thanks. Number 2 from Pete Woodroffen Music. Sorry if I said that wrong. Pete Woodroffen Music. Noah removed all of their teeth. Oh,
okay. That's Jesus. A lot of dental work.
That's a lot of.
Good luck removing the teeth of a T-Rex, right?
Yeah.
How did that work?
First of all, kudos to him for building a boat that could hold one. Second of all, having the strength to keep it in line. And then number 1 from 13 ABCDE, they said Noah controlled the animals by threatening bestiality.
Jesus.
Whoa.
Okay. Whoa. Hold on. Who picked this one as our number 1? That's okay.
That is
all right. That's a choice.
The thoughts and opinions of those who comment on this show are not the thoughts and opinions of those who produce this show or engage.
Concerned about the person that picked the top 3.
Thank you for that.
And picked the order of the top 3.
Whoever picked it was like, yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you for everybody that left your comments. Bestiality excluded, I'd say, but what's our problem for this next week, Sydney?
Yeah, the problem for the next week is, what do sermons and dentist appointments have in common? Enter your best answer below in the video comments. The video comments, not the live chat. If you do it in the live chat, we won't see it to consider it for the top 3. You can do both. You can copy and paste it in both. Just make sure it gets in the actual comments of the video.
Yep.
But what about you, gentlemen? What do you think sermons and dentist appointments have in common?
I gotta go maybe once or twice a year, because Christmas or Easter or whatever. I don't know. That's my lame contribution.
Yeah, I'll say the promise that if you suffer this now, it'll be better afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say the thing they have in common is that they both go better if I'm numb. But Thank you. Can't feel anything.
Good. Now you guys can't use those ones. You got to be more original than us. Okay, so
I'm totally numb. The experience is fine. So those are great answers. I appreciate it. I'm excited to see what everybody else comments in the video comments for consideration for next week. Cannot emphasize that enough. If you put it in the live chat only, we won't be able to include it in the options for next week. That being said, I want to go to our crew cam. I want to thank the people who are in charge of the video and audio, the moderators, notes, and all the different things that go on behind the scenes to make this show possible. We would not be able to do it without you. We appreciate you all. I always forget exactly how many people it takes to run this show until they show the crew cam. And it blows my mind that this many people sit and listen to our drivel. So I appreciate you all. And you keep coming back and you keep inviting me back and you keep inviting all of us back. We appreciate you. And notice, were they all wearing black? Wait a second. Can we go back to the crew cam? Were they all wearing black?
They?
I don't know. It looked like it for a second.
There's a green.
Okay, there's some green in there.
But it's more black than not black.
Right. To me, from my end,
too.
It looks like everybody was wearing black.
That's 4 out of 6 black shirts, I think, if my eyes are not deceiving me. So,
well, I mean, you're not a real atheist if you're not wearing black.
I guess so. I guess that's the test. That's the final test.
All right. So let's see here. Do we have a voicemail? Do we have any voicemails we can play? I love the voicemails.
We do. I think we also have calls in as well. So
excellent. Well, then, you know what? I'll let you pick. Somebody pick one of these calls.
We should go to calls, I think.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's take a call. This is a call-in show.
That is indeed. I meant you pick the call. I didn't mean you pick which one we do. Yeah, I don't know. We could just leave them waiting.
Listen, we have this is more like my speed, but we do have Steve from Nebraska that wants to talk to us about something here.
I'm excited for this one.
Steve from Nebraska, you're live on Talk Heathen. What do you want to talk to us about?
Yeah, hi Dan, Dr. Ben, and Cindy. Thanks for allowing us this opportunity to discuss evidence based on interstellar meteor one's material strength and unique metallic composition suggests this object that NASA's Center for Near-Earth Object Studies refers to as CNEOS 2014-0108 is actually an ancient alien technological artifact. And we now finally have the smoking gun evidence for the ancient alien chariots of the gods. So what do you guys think of this?
So who's NASA saying this? NASA said, yeah, this is smoking gun evidence for being aliens / the chariot of the gods. Who's saying that?
Dr. Avi Loeb. So on January.
So it's not NASA. I just want to be clear because you did say NASA saying this earlier. Unless I misunderstood you.
No, they're saying they're referring to the object of interest. They refer to it as CNEOS, and you guys can look this up. I'm not making this up. This is actual news. CNEOS 2014-01-08, and Dr. Avi Loeb has recovered. Fragments.
Yeah, so here's the Wikipedia right off the bat. CNEOS 2014-0108, also known as Interstellar Meteor 01, was a 0.45 meter meteor that impacted Earth on the 8th of January 2014 near the northeast coast of Papua New Guinea. It was claimed to be an interstellar object in a 2019 preprint by astronomers Amir Siraj and Avi Loeb, and this was published in 2022. This was supported by the U.S. Space Command in 2022 based on object's velocity relative to the sun. NASA and other astronomers doubt this, and still other experts found Earth-related explanations for the purported meteorite impact instead. And there's like a million citations there for the people who doubt that this is alien stuff.
Well, I'll present the case that this is an ancient alien artifact. So on January 8th, 2014, U.S. military satellites detected and tracked this meteor-sized interstellar one meteor traveling nearly 40 miles per second until it impacted off the coast of, you said, Papua New Guinea. And based on this object's high velocity, U.S. Space Command determined this object is indeed of interstellar origin. And then Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb led an expedition to retrieve and study the fragmentary remnants of interstellar meteor 1, from which some millimeter-scaled metallic spherules were thoroughly analyzed. They were found to have a material strength greater than any thing in our solar.
You know what's awesome is that they
I gotta
actually haven't found any fragments of this thing, though. So
hold on.
this is.
I have to interrupt him for a second.
Go, Sydney. Go.
I need you to tell me what this means in your own words, because I feel like you're reading something off to us, but I don't know what you think of this. Like in your own words, what does all of this information that you're reading to us mean to you? And what are your thoughts on this so that we can then give our response to those thoughts? Because it sounds like you're reading something off to us, but I want to know what you think that means.
Okay, so these fragments they found are extremely rich in 3 elements: beryllium, lanthanum, and uranium. And the lanthanum and uranium are something like on the order of 500 times more plentiful than in earthly rocks. And this is indicative of anything unlike anything in our solar system. But the beryllium is also 100 times more plentiful than that on Earth. This is very important because this is produced in a process where it's chipped out from the nuclei of heavier elements. This occurs by the impact of high energy cosmic rays, and this is definitely a sign of interstellar travel. And
see, that's where I think that's
and here's my question.
That's where you lose me.
Even if this is true, that there are fragments of this thing that is outside of our solar system, how do we connect this to alien travel? Like how can I make that leap instead of saying that this is something that came from far away from some natural process that we don't quite understand at this moment? That'd be more where I would think about this. Here's why. From a space rock? Does this come from a space rock?
Here's why.
I just from far away and with stuff that isn't as likely to be found here.
I just read up on this now. Download complete over here. Okay, I understand what's happening here. So this astronomer funded an expedition to try to find the fragments. Purportedly, they found the fragments. This has not been confirmed by outside observers. There are those who doubt this, but the fragments that they did found allegedly, based on some analysis, is older than the solar system itself. So if these fragments are older than the solar system itself, I guess the idea is that this is from a civilization that's so advanced and so old that they come from outside of ourselves. Or of course it could be just a fucking meteor, right? But yeah, there is not enough evidence from what I'm seeing here to confirm that these fragments that they found are even from this same impact, right? They just found some fragments at the bottom of the ocean. It can mean a lot of different things. But 2, whether it's even remotely related to alien aircraft, that's a whole other can of worms. So I'm not impressed from what I'm seeing so far, Steve.
Well, I guess, Steve, my question would be, and then I swear I'll let you talk. We found some new stuff. How does that mean evidence of aliens?
Okay. Well, firstly, this object did not incinerate until it was in the low atmosphere. It did not burn up in the high atmosphere. This object was traveling at a rate of speed of 40 miles a second. That's like 3 times faster than our fastest space probes now. This is traveling many orders, magnitudes faster than the Voyager craft.
So what? So this could be something. Okay, hold on. Yeah, if there are plenty of rocks that travel very fast from far away, like you're the one making the assumption that it is somehow related to space travel.
Yeah, why is that? What does that have to do with space travel?
No, I'm not. This isn't my idea. This is Dr. Abby Loeb who says it might be.
And why are you trusting this random person? Why are you trusting this random person?
Let's back this up. So arguments, right? Arguments have premises and conclusions, right? So you're stating a premise here. One of these premises is that this meteorite is only burned up in lower atmosphere. Okay, let's say I accept that. What are the ramifications of that? What does that have to do with the conclusion that this is alien in origin? We still have not made that connection yet.
Well, it doesn't have any naturally occurring alloys. These alloys look very artificially generated, and this has resilience unlike any space rock in our own solar system. So this looks to me like it could be. And I don't want to jump the gun.
Here's the problem. Steve. Like, sure, I can agree that the way that the alloys are composed could be different from what we'd see in the context of like Earth, something that's made on Earth. I could get on the same page with you on that.
Yeah.
The thing, though, is that you can't say, well, this is different than what we have on Earth, therefore an alien made it. It's like, sure, if we made something artificially similar here on Earth, okay, cool. That doesn't mean that something was therefore artificially made like that out in the universe. It could be that it came from a place where the physical parameters are set up to where that would be the thing that was produced from that context, right? Like we're working within a set of parameters that we don't know. Like we have this thing that came from we don't know where, we don't know how far away. All we know is this is the result, and now you kind of have to backtrack with the science to see, like, can we hypothesize what would have done this? And there's a lot more. There's a lot of heavy lifting being done by this assertion of aliens, or assertion of artificial like production of this. And I don't think you have the arguments to do all that heavy lifting that needs to be done.
Well, not only that, but in this explanation, he mentioned, it's unlike anything we found in our solar system. Clearly, it's not. Clearly, this is our first example of this thing existing in our solar system. I get that the idea is, well, we've never seen this before in our solar system, so this was clearly made by intelligent life force somewhere else. But in my opinion, by it existing, by us seeing it, that proves that it could potentially exist in the solar system from some place that we haven't seen. So my brain doesn't go, we've never seen this before, therefore aliens. My brain says, we've never seen this before, therefore it came from somewhere, and we need to figure out where it came from. And our previous conjecture that this could not exist in our solar system has been disproven because here it is in front of our eyes.
Well, there is some more news on this. Octavio is going to do further investigations. He's going to go back down and recover more, try to find more pieces of this. Obviously, they just have a small sample size to work from, so they need to get a larger sample size to more clarify what this exactly is. I mean, I don't want to say it's aliens, but it does look to me like aliens.
All right. Well, so again, I've been reading this entire time while the other hosts have been talking. Avi Loeb seems to me is a Harvard astronomer. Okay, so there's some credibility there. He's also had a career with looking for aliens throughout everything he does. In fact, he had trouble trying to find folks to get the funding for this project. It cost $1.5 million to get a submarine team to even get this fragment because nobody else agreed with some of his calculations on what was done with this particular meteoroid fragment. When they found it, they've done radiometric analysis that they, appears to maybe have been done, to be older than the solar system. But again, there's still other people that doubt him even on that. I'm glad that he wants to find some other fragments for this thing. But again, like this, to find the particular fragment of a single meteorite and be like, we're going to find the one for this one thing is so ludicrously low. The probability is so small that this one submarine team having to find it is pretty wild if that is the case, if it actually comes from that. So I think we have a guy here, probably some motivated reasoning, and other people in his field probably feel the same way, which is why it hasn't been confirmed by NASA or any other astronomical organization that I've seen here, saying that, hey, maybe that this is just a guy who found maybe part of another meteorite, maybe something else going on, but doesn't match the calculations that he's proposed and doesn't match the material that we would expect. Because typically when you find something anomalous like this, it tends to be a data measurement error, right? A metric error rather than something that's brand new or fine. So I will remain skeptical of this until other more knowledgeable, more expert people can confirm it for me, not just one guy who got the funding to get this project done for a lifelong career of finding extraterrestrial stuff, which he has done and has written at least one book about. So, yeah, I'm not impressed so far, Steve.
Well, he has the material that can be independently analyze. I think that certainly has to happen because because he dares to claim the obvious that nobody else wants to. So
it's not the
what he's
obvious
doing-
though, is it? Right?
Right.
No, and what he's doing, he's starting backwards. He's starting
Yeah.
backwards from the scientific method. He's already decided what he wants it to be and is going out looking for evidence to confirm what he wants instead of just asking the question, like, we have this thing. What is it? What can we learn about it? That's how we need to approach it. I'm not saying that it can't be aliens. It could be, but we don't have enough to get there yet. We have to broaden our differentials, so to speak, on what this is.
Right.
Not only this, I need to point this out. Not only this, Steve, it has been independently looked at. If you've actually looked at this, astrophysicist Steve Desch at Arizona State University commented, Loeb's claims are polluting good science, conflating the good science we do with this ridiculous sensationalism and sucking all the oxygen out of the room, and said several of his colleagues are consequently refusing to engage with Loeb in the peer review process. Monica Grady from the Open University argued that the evidence for Loeb's claims is, quote, rather shaky, end quote, and points more plausibly to terrestrial pollution. Patricio A. Gallardo, in an American Astronomical Society paper, similarly concluded the samples were consistent with coal ash contamination. Loeb and collaborators subsequently published 2 papers saying chemical analysis ruled out coal ash contamination and indicated extrasolar origins. Loeb and Morgan McLeod proposed a tidal disruption mechanism that could cause meteors to be ejected into trajectories leading to the described observations. And some other people have looked into some seismic stuff that they say that they claim, but by driving a truck near their sensor, they may have created uncertainty as to the location of the meteorite itself. It sounds shaky. It's really, really shaky. We're not going to start believing in aliens. Nobody should start believing in aliens just because of one really shaky meteor fragment here.
Right.
I don't think that's the way to do it.
Well, and here's the thing. I'm never going to be against looking into stuff as often as possible, getting second opinions, getting third opinions. I'll never be against that. What I do have an issue with is somebody saying, no, I keep repetitively getting an answer I don't like. So I'm just going to keep hiring independent researchers and processors until one of them agrees with what I want. So if this person is willing to admit at the end of the day, after they've had it independently looked at 150,000 times, if they're willing to admit, okay, I was wrong, it's not aliens, I really wanted it to be, I was really hoping it would be, my whole thing is looking for aliens, and this ended up not being an example of that, that's somebody that I would say, hey, you know what, thanks for looking into it anyway, would have been cool if it had been. But if this person is going to continually hire independent, quote unquote, researchers until they get the answer they want, that's problematic in my opinion.
Yep.
He's got a new paper out that's going to counter the criticism he's received. His article's going to be published in Chemical Geology. It's not industrial pollution's only been around. With the Industrial Revolution 300 years ago, it was not billions of years old as this object is.
That's not what they're claiming. They're saying that there's been contamination on the evidence sample. They're not saying that the meteor itself would have chemical pollution from a billion years ago.
No, this isn't coal ash. This is from outside the facility.
Steve, you haven't even looked at this thing. How do you know?
Because he's got a paper out that's been.
Yeah, and there's other people that have looked at the paper and said that it's wrong.
Steve, I have papers out.
His criticisms.
See this thing?
Steve, you're saying on the one hand, you're willing to say, well, he needs to engage with other people to look at this independently. And I say, okay, here's some people that have looked at his stuff independently and said it's bullshit. And now you're saying, oh, no, well, those people are wrong. Right. So what is it going to be? Are we here to find truth, or are we here to prove that aliens are real?
No, we need to further investigate before we find my conclusion. I'm totally with the scientific method there. And I know we don't need to do this in reverse. I don't want to jump the gun to any conclusions. So, I'm not quite.
Okay, I agree. But if you're on the same page with me there, Steve, why are you calling me here saying that we have evidence of aliens? Because it sounds like you're jumping the gun if you're doing that.
I think it is.
But don't you agree? You just admitted, though, that we don't want to jump the gun with this, right? We only have one meteor fragment that's shaky at best that's been criticized. Why should we jump the gun with this and say that this is aliens? Don't you think that's jumping the gun?
We should be open. We should be open to that probability.
Being open to the possibility is not the same thing as calling up a person's show and saying, hey, we have evidence of aliens. Have you heard of this?
Wait,
right?
I gotta agree with Steve for a second, though. Steve said we should be open to the idea that it's aliens. I agree. We should also be open to the idea that it is not aliens.
Yes.
That's where I draw the line. So, Steve, I totally agree with you. We should totally be open to anything that research might suggest. But we should also be open, and this researcher, should also be open to the fact that aliens are not involved at all. The more research he does, the more he's going to find out it's not going the way that he thought, and it's not going in the direction of aliens, and then start over from a different angle. So yes, I do agree. We should be open to that idea. We should also be open to the fact that that idea is not true, and listen to people who come back with evidence to suggest that it is not true.
Yeah, I don't know. I've taken up much of this conversation, so I don't know much more we could talk about this. I think we've made our point. But you're the host today, Sydney. What do you think?
Yes, and we do have other callers. So yeah. Steve, thank you so much for calling in. Thank you for presenting this idea to us and introducing us to this research that I'm sure we're going to continue to read into. If this ends up going somewhere, call back, please. I would love to talk more about this if this ends up going somewhere that actually proves aliens. But at the moment, we do got to move on to the next calls. Don't want to keep our callers waiting. We have several in the queue. Thank you so much for calling. And anybody who's listening to this and wants to... Yeah, no problem. And wants to respond to anything that we talked to Steve about, please feel free to call in as well. Before we go to the next call, though, we have some exciting news that I'm going to let Sophia tell us about, if we can have Sophia.
Calling all free thinkers. We are excited to announce that the ACA is launching its first ever fundraising campaign, Amplify ACA, in partnership with Amplify Austin. This is your chance to expand our impact by making your voices heard and supporting the shows that you love.
We invite you to join us on March 5th starting at 6 p.m. We're going to be doing a 24-hour fundraising event and camp out live
Sophia is telling everybody about.
Library in Austin, Texas. We've got a great show in the works, a whole variety hour with our hosts doing different things, not just taking calls like you're used to, but we're going to have the fun facts and playing some games and lots of different activities. So be sure to join us from that. Again, it's going to be really exciting, and we're looking forward to having as many people involved as we possibly can.
Donating is easy on amplifyatx.org. Just search the word atheist. We're the only ones that will come up. And click the donate button. Follow us on our socials for more information.
And this is important. We want to be able to amplify the voices of reason and compassion worldwide. So we ask you, please, donate on Amplify
Perfect.
Austin
All right.
Day.
Thank you, Ben, Sophia, and Jamie. This is our first ever major fundraising campaign, and we need your help as our viewers, as our listeners, to make it a success. So mark your calendars for March 5th at 6 p.m. for our fundraising kickoff party and 24-hour live stream. Come on down to the Free Thought Library if you happen to live in Austin, Texas, or join us via the Atheist Experience channel. Make a plan to donate if you can, and let's amplify the ACA together. Thank you, chat, also for helping me confirm that you could in fact hear Sophia. I couldn't hear her on my end, but they could hear her. So thank you so much for those who responded. We appreciate that. All right, so let's move on to our next call. I'd love to hear it.
So Sydney, do you, because, okay, actually I picked the last one. So I guess Ben, you can pick the next one if you want to do that.
Yeah. Let's talk to Alan, him from Michigan. It sounds like you want to make a case for hard atheism. I'm ready to hear it.
Oh, interesting.
Yep, that's it. Hey, thanks for taking my call.
No problem. So what do you consider hard atheism?
Yeah, well, that's why I put it in quotes, because it's the agnostic atheist versus Gnostic atheist, I guess. I mean, I'm willing to say I'm morally certain that no gods exist.
Okay.
Because, as far as I can see, all gods are human artifacts or human cultural creations, and they have a specific starting point somewhere on the timeline of human history. So if they were actual gods, I would think we would have heard from them before 5,000-6,000 years ago, and that they wouldn't be specific to the cultures that created them. I may be not saying this as well as I could, but that's the
it helped. Yeah. So like when you say hard atheism, do you mean like somebody who's willing to say that no matter what, they won't change their mind, they're an atheist? Like what would an alternative to hard atheism be?
I mean, what I mean is simply that I believe there are no gods, and I believe that with a very high degree of certainty.
Okay. And in your opinion, for anybody watching,
because I don't actually like it.
Yeah, I'd never actually heard of it until today. So thank you I'm going to spend some time looking that up on the old internet and Reddit and stuff like that after this. But in your opinion, what is it that you've seen or read or come in contact with that has made that determination for you, where you can say, this is what I needed to see or hear or know in order to come to this conclusion for myself?
Well, let's see. Well, after believing for like forever, I looked at what I believed and said, okay, this is all cultural. This is not necessarily universal. So then I just dig a little farther. I read, for example, Robert Wright, The Evolution of God, and the book Sapiens. And then another one was Against the Grain, which is a little tangential, but basically he's talking about how after humans discovered agriculture, there was a 5,000 or 6,000 year period where we were agriculturalists, but did not move into the stage of building cities. And then when we get to civilization, to the level of civilization where we are building cities, then we see that religion becomes an arm of the state. You know, because what king doesn't want an eye in the sky watching all of his subjects?
Right.
And the reason for this is because they had a very difficult time keeping people urbanized, because life as a hunter-gatherer was basically better than life of an agriculturalist. And that's confirmed in, I don't have the source at the top of my head, but I've read that in more than one place. Where
now, when you came to this conclusion,
I'm
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to ask you a follow-up question. When you came to this conclusion, I'm curious, based on your experience, was this, because you mentioned that you were a believer before, you were religious before, was this difficult for you to process? Was it sad? Was it easy? Was it a relief? Like, what was your feeling related to your former faith versus...
First, it was difficult. It took me, I started to deconvert or deconstruct maybe 20 years before I finally did. And I really started doubling down and doing like, okay, I'm having my doubts, so I'm going to do this thing. Like I went on pilgrimage twice, you know, prayed more, did all this kind of, it's like, okay, I'm really struggling with this. But I wanted to keep, I wanted to keep believing what I believed most of my life. Like I didn't want to find that I was been wrong for 40 years. So yeah, it was difficult. And then I started looking more carefully at, okay, what's the difference between believing a thing and knowing a thing? And I realized I don't really know anything that I claim to know from my religion.
So that's
it's things.
But that's an interesting point though, because if your argument today is an argument for like hard atheism or like a more Gnostic atheism, where are you willing to take on that burden of proof to say, I'm going to say that there is no deity? Because while personally, I would say that my level of confidence that there isn't anything supernatural is fairly high. If I'm going into an argument,
right,
it's harder to make the case that there's a high level of certainty in that. I know, at least from my perspective, I prefer to take the agnostic atheist approach and like not accept belief. But I'm just curious, what is your argument then, especially in light of just saying that, like the difference between believing and knowing? How would you respond to a theist, especially if a theist were to say that? Are you suggesting that you know that there isn't a deity or supernatural?
Right. Okay. Well, what I'm suggesting that I know is that all the available evidence I've seen or found points to God's being a cultural construct. So the question that got me moving in this direction is it's like, okay, why am I accepting the possibility of gods, but not the possibility of, say, fairies, pixies, vampires, unicorns, whatever? I was like, well, I mean, who's an a-fairist or an a-unicornist? I mean, it's something that doesn't exist. So why are we giving gods a pass? Why are we suggesting that's like, okay, well, these other supernatural things we know don't exist, but why are we assuming that gods don't exist when we can see in the historical record that gods have the same pedigree? I mean, we know that, or we believe we know. I mean, we can't go back to the Stone Age, but it seems that the progression has been, okay, we need something to explain nature. Okay, so it's the spirit of the tree pushes the buds out in the spring, and eventually that evolves into a God belief. And we see the progression of, well, even if in the period of when Yahweh first shows up on the scenes, the cultural milieu is that all cultures have their own gods, and all cultures expected other cultures to have their own gods. And they even had prohibitions. Well, you never speak ill of gods in their own country. So there was a kind of respect. Okay, I know you believe that because that's what you believe over there, but we believe this here.
Yeah.
And then when Yahweh come along, it's like,
I get what you're saying, right? Culturally, gods have cultural ideas, right? They're culturally influenced. They're sociologically influenced. That's fine. And you could even make the case, some have made the case for an evolutionary psych, sort of background to gods as well, although that can be shaky when you're talking about evolutionary psychology, because you can claim a million things with evolutionary psychology. But there's people who have made that case that say, hey, look, gods seem to be something that seem to be a reflection of human beings. We're on the same page there. Ben and I, Sydney, we're all on the same page there. What Ben is sort of pointing out, though, is the same thing that I would point out, which is there's a difference between the soft atheist and hard atheist position, which you are describing here. Ben and I are more on the soft atheist camp, because even if we can describe most gods from history as being cultural constructs, that doesn't exclude the possibility of a god altogether necessarily, right? So like you can think of other kinds of things where things are culturally construct, right? That doesn't mean that they're necessarily not real or don't have some kind of legitimacy to them, right? So the question remains, what if there could be a kind of God, and maybe it's a God that we don't really know the nature of or could describe very aptly, but still a higher power of some kind that is beyond our ability to see, taste, touch, feel, whatever. How could we possibly exclude something like that? That's the problem that we kind of have, which is like, well, look, we can't, right? We can't verify that. So we have to leave open a possibility of something beyond that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Christianity or any other kind of religion is true. You can still point to the cultural origins of that, but there still has to be this sort of philosophical gray zone that we can't really comment on, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's two reasons. I mean, yes, if there is a God, well, okay, I'll say this. If there's a God, I doubt that it's a God that's worshipped by humans, because all of those gods have a history, and we can point to that history. So yeah, maybe there is something else, but do I have to also consider fairies? Because, for example, fairy lore globally is pretty consistent. Vietnamese fairies and Filipino fairies and Irish fairies all pretty much behave the same way according to the lore. So,
Sure.
But
what I would
think-
say to that, Alan, what I would say to that is, look, those are based on the things we can see, hear, touch, right? Where again, we're talking about claims about being a deist conception of God is still not the most popular, but still fairly common throughout history as well. This idea of a God that creates us and does stuff for us, and then just isn't involved or interacts with us in any way whatsoever. That's still a relevant possibility you have to consider. I'm not saying you have to believe it, right? There's a difference there. I'm not saying, oh, well, this is a possibility, therefore that's the most likely conclusion. I don't think you should go there, but we can't necessarily exclude it, right? So if we can't necessarily exclude it, then that has to lead us, at least in my mind, to the conclusion of soft atheism, which is we can be open to that when there's evidence that appears that that's the case, but I don't have any evidence of that, so I don't have an active belief in that. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, it does, and I agree with you, but I've just come to a different conclusion based on that.
Well, I mean,
until
even based on the way that you're talking, based on the way that you're talking, your arguments still sound like a soft atheist position. Like the fact that you say I do not accept these beliefs does not mean the same as I positively disbelieve. There's a little bit of nuance there, but I think even the way that you've said your arguments, you've said I do not accept these beliefs, but it doesn't sound like you are 100% opposed to evidence of any of the above. Is that correct, or are you in that camp?
Well, I mean, okay, if someone presented evidence and it was absolutely no way it could be anything else, then I would have to change my position, but I don't see any reason to change my position.
That's the same position we're in. That is the soft atheist position.
I was going to say, that sounds like soft atheism.
Yeah, I think you're more agnostic than you think you are in this case. I think your argument is a soft atheist position. Maybe there's just some confusion with how are we phrasing this, because while they sound like very similar statements, the I do not accept this belief and I actively disbelieve are different statements.
Right. The hard atheist position is saying there is no possibility of there being a God.
I won't change my mind. Right.
Right.
Okay. Can a human be, absolutely certain about anything, though?
Sure. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
can a reasonable human be absolutely certain about anything? Yeah. No. Unfortunately, there are unreasonable people out there, right?
And this is why it's so hard to take that hard atheist position, just because it's hard to meet that burden of proof from that negative side. Like when people say that you can't disprove a negative, that's not necessarily true, but it is a lot more difficult. You have to do a lot more heavy lifting on your end if you're going to.
Right.
So
taking the hard approach basically means you're also willing to reject any evidence you see to suggest otherwise. And unfortunately, there are people who will do that, whether or not they actually have seen evidence.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also a rational human, so I'm not going to reject obvious evidence. Okay, and part of it is my own religious experience. I mean, I spent a lifetime praying and misreading, my prayers being answered. I mean, for 4 decades. So, I mean, I was, and maybe this is just a reaction to feeling that I was hoodwinked, or basically I hoodwinked myself, because I converted as an adult, though a young adult.
Well, we appreciate you calling in and kind of. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah, we appreciate you calling in and kind of helping us parse out the difference between soft and hard atheism. I think that's an important distinction, and I think it's important that people understand whether or not they fall in those categories. And I think we've done a pretty decent job of recognizing that maybe you're a softer atheist than you thought, because like you said, you're a rational human being who's willing to take evidence as much as your pretty sure there's not going to be evidence, you're at least willing to say that if you were to see evidence to suggest the opposite of what you believe, you'd be willing to believe it if it was evidence enough.
Okay.
Yeah, but thanks for calling in, Alan. We really appreciate hearing your
That's why
perspective.
I called in so I could hear.
Yeah.
I could hear from people who talk about this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And, like work it out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And if you read up more on it and you have additional thoughts on the matter, please call back in. We'd love to continue this conversation and to educate people more on the difference between those two things. Because I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out which camp they fall in.
I know Richard too might have a really fun time with this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Alan. We appreciate speaking to you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
So before we get to our next call, I just want to make sure I hit these super chats. There's only 10, so they're not going to get the answer to the secret question. There's only 2. Sorry.
I was going to say, that is the exact number by which we would give the answer.
There's only 2. Sorry, we need 10. But I still want to show these people how much I really appreciate their contribution, because we wouldn't be able to do whatever we do without their contributions. So the first one comes through from Subham Patil. And is this rupees, chat? Is the symbol rupees? I don't know. Do we have like a screenshot of? Yeah,
that is rupees.
Okay,
that is
perfect.
Indian rupees.
I'm glad that I got that. I was guessing. But Subham says, love to Sydney, Dan, and Ben, and talk Heathen with a little heart. I don't even know how to do a heart in the chat like that. That's awesome. And then we have another one from Miranda Rensberger, a member for 1 year and a frequent donor. Miranda, we really appreciate everything you've donated over at least even the time that I've been here, probably longer than that. Miranda says, we're all brothers in Christ or something though, right? I used to get really pissed in Sunday school when they said I was everybody's brother. I'll be honest, Miranda, almost every day when I'm really frustrated with somebody, I call them my brother in Christ when I'm about to like talk down to them. So I do that, but it's for the irony. I'll say like, my brother in Christ, this is how this conversation is going. But I want you to know I do it with sarcasm in my heart, in my cold, black, dead heart. So thank you to those, why did I almost say vendors? To those donors. My brain is somewhere else right now. We really appreciate you donating your time and your resources. We couldn't do this without your help. But that being said, gentlemen, who would like to pick the next call?
Yeah, we have a theist in the queue.
Let's do it.
So this is Jamie, pronouns are he, him, from Texas. And it sounds like the argument is about the necessary existence for a universal mind.
Okay.
Jamie, can you tell us more about what your premises are and where you're going with this?
Hello.
Greetings.
Welcome.
Jamie, you're live on the air on Talk Heathen. Go ahead and give us your take on universal minds.
I am a Christian man.
Well, soundboard. So we should go ahead and stop this call. Definitely a troll. Great stuff. Right.
And with that, we're going to move on.
Yes.
To Gabe from Texas, wanting to talk about how to distinguish between natural and supernatural. If the button works. There you go. Gabe, you are live on Talk Heathen. Tell us a little bit more about your question.
Hello, Gabe from Texas. Again, live on Talk Heathen right now. Go ahead.
All right, I will return you to the queue. We can figure out if there's an audio issue, and we'll bring on Connor, any and all pronouns from Kentucky, here to talk about gender abolitionism. What is your specific question or comment?
So I wanted to, okay. First of all, at the beginning of the show, you all asked what was Jesus sent to do. I just wanted to throw in my bone as an icebreaker. If he was real, his dad was God, so he only had XX chromosomes, and then he's a man, so he came to be trans. But besides that, sorry. I wanted to know your all's opinion on, gender abolitionism moving forward, I guess. What is your all's perspective on it as an idea?
Yeah, real quick, before we go down that rabbit hole, because we know I will happily jump down this rabbit hole with you. What are you defining as gender abolitionism, just for the people who haven't heard of this before, and so we get on the same page?
Okay. It's a little, I guess, difficult to explain, and I'm no psychologist or anything, but I guess the idea behind it would be, right now we have gender, so we have like man and woman, and especially right now, those labels kind of have gotten to the point where all they mean is, yeah, I'm a man. What is that? I'm a man. And I guess gender abolitionism is sort of, at least in my opinion, the next sort of step of that, which is, it's a socially constructed thing. It puts people in boxes, but the boxes, in my opinion, kind of do more harm than good. You know, we've been using it for as long as we fucking existed to harm women. And I guess the idea would be, the next step is to erase those. So instead of being, I'm a Connor, I'm a man, but I'm a man who occasionally likes to wear dresses, hi, I'm Connor. I like to wear dresses. Sometimes I like playing shooter games. And it's just sort of, instead of describing yourself with a gendered term, you just are who you are.
Yeah. And I have a lot of thoughts about gender abolitionism. Like, as a concept, I think it's great. I think as an ideal, that is what society should strive for. I would agree that there's a lot of baggage with the way gender is constructed as a society, a lot of assumptions about who you are, what you're going to do, just based on anatomical features. And so I agree with you. The question is, do I think that this is likely to happen or even feasible within our society as it exists? No, I do not think that, like, at least in our lifetimes, I don't think that it's going to be well received, easy to implement. I think having to undo all of the societal constructs that we've built are very, very difficult to overcome. And so I don't think it would happen. I would like it to happen, but I think it's one of those ideals that, you know, small communities could work towards. If you got a bunch of people, you know, and moved to an island somewhere, that could, it could work in that way. But I think it's probably near impossible for it to actually be implemented in at least our society.
I share similar thoughts with Ben. So, you know, we're all accepting people here. We're all absolutely fine with whatever people want to identify themselves with. And the fact that we have, a post-gender society is very idealist to me. Right. I don't know what enforcement mechanism would occur to make something like that happen. It seems like it would be a great goal to have. And I obviously want to continue to deconstruct and dismantle any hierarchies that may occur when gender appears in itself, right? We've already seen trouble with that. It's hard for me to understand a world where that idea of gender gets completely taken away from people. I will, you know, if being a gender abolitionist means to continue to dismantle those hierarchies that are present in gender, then yes, I am a gender abolitionist by that definition. But as far as what world would that look like if there are no genders, I don't know if that's even gonna ever be a thing. So I don't know if that's something that I'd want to shoot for, maybe. But I have questions as to how that would work and how other people would want that to work, I suppose. But in practice, at least in theory, I have no real problems with it, I suppose. But it could be a pretty complex topic.
Right. Right.
So what about you, Sydney?
I think the one place that I would really like to see that happen is in law. I would like for legal rules and laws and clauses being made based on gender to disappear. I don't think necessarily that there's anything wrong with people identifying as a gender. I've always enjoyed, you know, being a woman, but I also enjoy that other people have the opportunity to experience what it's like to be a woman, even if when they were born, that wasn't the gender that they were assigned. I don't think that gatekeeping being a woman or a man is necessary at all. I don't think there's any point to telling somebody they're not enough of a man or enough of a woman in order to, identify as those things. But I think it would be interesting to have laws that don't differentiate and have different rules for men and for women. I think that would be neat. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily think that we're headed in that direction, which is a bummer. But I do think that people who support equality...
Exact opposite.
Yes, exactly. And I think that would be a great way to head towards equality. But in terms of people identifying as men or women, I don't see that being a problem. I also don't see it identifying as neither or non-binary as being an issue. I think it's being made an issue that doesn't need to be an issue. And I think that identifying as genders could potentially just be one more way to identify yourself as a person, but it's not something that should be as weaponized as it is currently. And I would like to see the weaponization of that disappear. In terms of the actual terminology and use of genders, I don't think that'll ever disappear, but I would love to see the weaponization of it disappear, whether it's pro or anti or for or against a certain gender. I would love to see uniformity in laws created and equality created. But yeah, it's an interesting idea. I'd be curious if there were any cultures around the world, even ones, that maybe haven't been visited by many outside populations or outside like scientists. Maybe there's one on an island somewhere that doesn't even know gender exists, something like that. But I don't see that ever being a real thing. But I would love to see it in terms of control and law and weaponization.
And I guess like my perspective on that, and I would love to hear your all's perspective, is I feel obviously like I'm coming at this from the perspective of a person who is like agender and know and love my trans people in my life. And I guess like the thing that I look at it as is I feel like there's a sort of inherent weaponization, or maybe not weaponization, but there's inherent problems with just the concept of gender, where it is something that can be very beautiful. It can be very beautiful for a person to identify as a man or a woman and come out and like find themselves in that way. But I think that there also is a sense in which, like, first of all, dysphoria existing, I feel, is almost just a product of gender existing, not necessarily dysmorphia. I feel like if you dropped a person on an island and they grew up there and they never heard of man or woman, they could still be like, yeah, I don't really like having these things on my chest or on my crotch. I want them gone.
Right.
But, you wouldn't necessarily get a person who's like, I feel horrible wearing dresses. I really want to wear pants. Because they would just wear pants and be cool. Like they don't have to be like, I'm a man, I have to be a man. But I guess maybe you'll have a different perspective on that, and I'd love to hear that.
So somebody put in the chat a comment that I thought was interesting. ROBTBO, so Robtbo perhaps, said, gender distinctions are generalizations. We fucked up when we started pretending that they're rules.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really complicated, because I'm a trans person as well. And so like I see a lot of this nuance, and where I definitely agree, like going back to my initial point, I agree that it's an ideal that we should strive for, that your gender should be personal to you, and it shouldn't determine any assumptions made about you. It shouldn't determine like anything else in how you interact with people or the society around you. Unfortunately, the fact that this is so ingrained in our society, like there isn't a way now that you can get through society without performing gender. And I use that term intentionally for people who don't hear it a lot, like because gender implies like the way that you interact with society, you perform your gender.
Right.
And whether you want to do it or not.
Whether you want to or not. And so even if we agree like, hey, you don't have to exist within these confines, you still have assumptions made about you based on how you perform your gender.
Right.
And even if you don't want to do those things, like you have to decide what consequences are you willing to accept for how you perform in society. Like if I grew out my hair, if I wore a dress, if I did all these things, like, sure, I would still be myself. I would still be a man. I'd still be a trans man. But I might be she, her more. I might I might be treated differently in a way that I don't want to be. And no, I don't think that that should be the standard. I don't think that that should be the assumption. But since it is, I have to live in a way that is the most, or like the least distressing for me and how I interact with people. So that's where I say, yes, I think that this is how it should be. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that from other people. And we have to just make the best decisions with what we have in our society.
And there's also, people think that it's men versus women versus non-binary people. Even within gender structures, there is like there's gatekeeping, there's generalization. So I am a cis, straight, white woman, and when I cut my hair or when I do certain things that are considered not feminine, other women will tell me that I'm not feminine enough. Other women will tell me like, oh, they don't say this anymore because I'm married, but they would say, you'll never find a husband doing this. You'll never, accept your feminine nature doing this. This is not female. This is unnatural. So it's interesting because even if we were to somehow find peace between the genders, just neutral existence between the genders, within the genders, you'll still find men telling other men they're not manly enough, they're not macho enough, right? Like the whole entire red pill section of the internet and society exists because men like to tell other men that they're not man enough. And the trad wife sort of things that are happening on the internet are a lot of times women telling other women that by having a job or by having a career, or by having an education, not all of them, but many of them say that makes you less feminine, that makes you less of a wife or a woman. And so I think that's also just a very interesting analyzation of, even if we were to find peace among men, women, non-binary, trans, we would still need to work within those genders to find peace within themselves.
Yeah, so many layers. It's a very complex question.
I wanted to kind of both touch on, it's interesting because I can kind of go four ways at once. Because one of the things I wanted to say, it's answering a question Dan asked earlier, but also kind of touching on points that both you, Sydney, and Ben made, and also what was his name, Rob, made in chat, which is like you asked earlier, Dan, like how do we enforce this? What does that even look like? I don't think it's something that we would enforce, and I don't think it's necessarily unrealistic. I do think it's unrealistic to expect it in even my lifetime, and I'm a 21-year-old, so I don't think it's happening under this government. We've got to get over this fucking hurdle first before we even try for shit like this. But I don't think it comes down to enforcement, like someone's like, I'm a man, and you go, yeah, all right. I think it comes down to sort of the way we educate people and like bring up our kids and stuff like that, and sort of teaching, first of all, coming at it from the perspective that gender is as fractal as there are as many ways to be a man as there are people who say they are a man. Yeah. And sort of touching on what you said, Sydney, which is, kind of going back to like, oh, it's very beautiful to embrace your femininity, but it can also be a really harmful thing because you cut your hair short and someone says, you are not filling this role that women should fill. And I feel like that is sort of where gender can be very harmful, is someone who doesn't want to be non-binary, like wants to be like, yeah, I'm a woman, or like, for example, my boyfriend, long hair, loves the color pink, wears Crocs, but doesn't wear dresses. But like people would come at him and be like, these various things make you less of a man. And I think that like, that is where gender can be pretty harmful.
Right.
Yes.
Coming at it from an educational perspective of like teaching our children, teaching the people around us, trying to build that sort of community of gender is as fractal as there are people. And then eventually that can move into, if everybody has their own gender, that is, I am Connor gender, you are Ben gender, you are Dan gender, what does it mean to be a man anymore? Then we can move towards the next step of, if it's as fractal as there are people, then maybe that label isn't useful anymore.
Sure. And what happens, what the reason why most people who encounter gender abolitionism, in my experience, who are also already familiar with other feminist concepts, are rather in agreement, is because the methods by which gender abolitionism presents itself is the same methods by which modern feminism is also doing, that being the de-emphasis of gender roles, right? The de-emphasis of gender, again, as a hierarchical principle, as something that by which to organize ourselves within society, right? We are slowly, at least sometimes it doesn't feel like it every day, but truly, statistically, we've shown that, people are doing the same kinds of roles and are performing the same kinds of things, regardless of gender identity. So the goals of a gender abolitionist, and what most of us would consider to be what feminism tries for today, again, that's complicated depending on what you mean by feminist. But the point is, they're kind of one and the same. The difference is the end conclusion, whether gender is even a useful construct by which any of us should be using to identify with ourselves at all. And that's one that gives me pause, and I don't know. I couldn't tell you the answer to, Connor. I don't know. But it is fascinating to look at. And of course, I will always continue to, again, do what I can to prove that, hey, gender is as socially constructed as it was since the day we humans first thought about it. And so with that, I'm comfortable with, continuing to do what I already do.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that perspective. I mainly just wanted to kind of bring it up, see how everybody felt about it, and maybe bring up the idea for people who haven't heard of that before. So
I'm down for it.
Yeah. Thanks, Connor. Thanks for calling in and helping us educate people on ideas they may not have heard of. Love doing that. Love having these conversations. And you've called in before, right, Connor? This isn't the first time we've spoken.
Or
maybe I'm thinking of like the after show or something.
I haven't spoken to any of you three. I just recently was on, I believe it's called Skeptic Generation with Eric. I don't remember his last name.
Your voice just sounded really familiar.
I did talk Heathen before. Yeah, it is great being able to talk to the three of you. But
yeah, thanks for calling in. We appreciate you. Call back if you ever have any other thoughts or ideas you want to run by us in the audience. We love having these kind of open-end conversations with our audience, kind of introduce people to ideas and potential distinctions of things. So thank you so much. We appreciate you calling.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Cool. And trans rights.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Before we head to our next call, I just want people to know that if you're in the Austin area, you can follow us on Meetup to come to community events. You can see what's going on at tiny.cc/ACA Meetup. There's Philosophy Under the Stars. There's Game Night. I almost said Philosophy Under the Stairs. That's a totally different event you have to subscribe to. So you can join our weekly watch parties at the Free Thought Library on Sundays for live viewings of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience, in case a lot of people don't know that. They're happening every Sunday. Doors open at noon. It's a great place to build community. And then please, again, mark your calendars for March 23rd. We'll be live in the studio for Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen will be hosted by Sophia Spina and Jamie the Blind Limey, and the Atheist Experience will be hosted by Secularity and me, Sydney Davis Jr. Jr. Please be sure to stop in and say hello. Doors open at noon. So which one of you gentlemen want to pick the next call?
Well, we got Gabe that came back.
Yeah, we should do that.
Perfect.
So hopefully the audio is working now. Gabe, him from Texas, again, wanting to talk about supernatural versus natural and how to distinguish between them. Gabe, tell us a bit more about your position.
I apologize for giving you the stupidest question of the day. How do you distinguish between natural and supernatural? How do you teach your kids that magic is not real?
Not a stupid question. I don't know why you'd say that's a stupid question. It's a great question because this is actually a really big debate about what counts as naturalism and what counts as doesn't. There's like a whole Charles Popper, literally his whole life was about this stuff. Okay. It was like, how do we figure out what can we even be considered within the realm of science and what we can't? And that answer is actually changing like a lot. I don't think that there's one clear objective answer that's going to exist through all of time, because like what my answer today would look like is already different from what it would look like 50 years ago or even 100 years ago, just based on the new kinds of methods that we've been able to adapt and use and discover for scientific inquiry, right? So it really just kind of depends. Like there's one way of describing it that says anything that we can interact with and observe, right, through our senses, sight, hearing, taste, what have you, counts within the realm of science and therefore counts within the realm of naturalism, which kind of like discludes a lot of things if you think about it, because like if God, for example, is something that we can see or hear or whatever, then that counts within the realm of naturalism. And that must mean that there must be some natural, the implication is that there's a naturalist explanation as to the things that we hear. Of course, Christians would disagree with that. So it also comes down to causal problems, right? Like, okay, if something is natural and we can observe it to be natural, does that mean that it has natural causes? It seems like for everything that we've observed, the answer is yes, which kind of discludes everything that's ever been supernatural ever, right? Because like ghosts and stuff don't really seem to have natural I guess somebody dying is a natural cause, but like, being able to go through walls and stuff, can that be explained through natural mechanisms? If not, it doesn't seem to be within the realm of naturalism. So I'm rambling here, but it's actually a really broad philosophical question that is more ambiguous than you might expect.
I mean, well, I have a thought, Gabe. Have you ever heard of James Randi?
Yes.
So for anybody who's listening and doesn't know who James Randi is one of my favorite people. He's up there with like Judge Judy, in terms of people that I just aspire to learn from.
Okay, hold on, pause. What do you mean he's up there with Judge Judy, Sydney? Let's
listen.
talk about that.
I have people are allowed to have heroes, Dan. People are allowed to have heroes. And since Betty White left this earth, and I can't name Betty White, Judge Judy gets put up in spot number one.
Well,
but it's
James Randi left the earth too, so does he get knocked off?
But James Randi is here with us in spirit.
Then
James
why
Randi
isn't Betty White? I'm confused.
Yeah. Okay.
Betty White's here. James Randi's here. Anyway, for anybody who doesn't know who James Randi is one of my favorite people, who alive or dead, who is a former magician who made a career out of debunking magicians. He had a show where he offered millions of dollars for anyone who could come on his show, perform a magic trick, and he could not debunk this magic trick. The thing is, nobody ever won the money because he was able to debunk every magic trick that somebody brought onto his show. And magicians came from all over the world at variant levels of fame to try and debunk and win, or not debunk, but to not be debunked and to win James Randi's money. So I think on just a simpler level, the way that I would teach a child if I had one to not believe in magic while also still having fun, having an imagination, finding joy in things like Harry Potter books and things like that, would be to just introduce them to people like James Randi, to allow them to be exposed to things like magicians, to be exposed to books like Harry Potter, but then to also say, hey, look at this cool guy, James Randi, who used to be a magician. This used to be his job. And now he gets to show us how all these magic tricks are done. You're not saying magic isn't real and anyone who believes in it is causing problems. You're saying magic is a really fun game. And there's people out here who can show us how that game works. Magic isn't real, but much like, I'm going to get hate for this one, much like wrestling, it's not real, but there's ways that we can still enjoy it knowing that what we're watching is a show. I'm probably never going to be welcomed back on the internet after saying that. Does that make sense though, Gabe?
Yeah, it makes sense a little bit. I had an argument with a Christian about the resurrection of Christ because I told him, well, it's a supernatural event, and you can't know it's real or not. And he was trying to tell me, how do you differentiate which is natural, not natural? And I didn't have an answer for that.
But see it, and first of all, I need to correct myself because I said Charles Popper earlier, and I'm dumb. I meant Karl Popper. I don't know why I said Charles. It's Karl. I'm dumb, and nobody should listen to me about anything ever. But let's think about this. Okay, so the resurrection event. Did people see it with their eyes? Yes, right. Like that's part of the story, right? People saw it. So that must mean you could say, okay, that there was at least a ghost or something that light bounced off of, that went into people's eyes, right? And we're able to observe, that's within the realm of naturalism, right? That's actually not as paranormal as one might expect. There's at least some observable mechanism, at least that should be happening there. Otherwise, there has to have been another way for us to receive that information. You see why it becomes unclear, right? Was this actually as supernatural as people say? Like the blending between these two realms, not as distinct or concrete as people often make it out to be. So that is something that you could analyze scientifically in a way, and I would argue that makes it a natural event of some kind. So that's what I'd tell your friend.
Yeah, and that's a similar argument that I use in these conversations, is that if you're making the claim that the supernatural realm interacted in some way with the natural realm, we should be able to see the effects on the natural realm, right? Like if God is actually having an impact on things, we should see that somewhere. And even if you take a deist perspective, if their idea is that God created things and then just let them go with it, that's still a way that the supernatural interacted with the natural, and therefore we should see evidence of it. And so I think we're on the same page with that particular argument. And I think that could be a great way for you to engage with your Christian friends.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for calling in. We appreciate, that's a great question. And it's a common question that I think gets brought up in theist versus atheist arguments as, well, how do you know the difference between the two? So thank you for calling in, Gabe. We appreciate you kind of kickstarting that conversation.
Thank you very much. Sorry about the connection issues.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for calling back.
It worked now.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a great call. And this is exactly the kind of debates that people have when people are making up their own fantasy realms and they're trying to develop their own magic systems. And then it inevitably becomes a kind of scientific system, because if there's like rules and things you can apply to it, then suddenly like it's just science again and it's not actually magic. Like it becomes really hard to actually make a like true magic system that makes sense in any way, right?
And it's funny too, because this is exactly where something like street epistemology does a great job. Because if you tell somebody like, okay, you have this belief, and you just keep asking them questions, and you get to a point where you're like, okay, how could you formulate an experiment then to demonstrate this? And what they come up with, if you let them just have at it, they come up with a scientific experiment. You'll hear them. They'll say like, oh yeah, we'll set up like these two different groups, and then we'll have like prayer for this. Like they'll set up an experiment. And it's wild how even among all different belief systems, the way that things are demonstrated ends up still being the same, and it still ends up being the scientific method.
Exactly. Yeah. Like if you're in Harry Potter world and you're casting Levioso, but the effect only happens when you're saying the word Levioso and you have a wand, that's an experimental variable that you're accounting for. Like
First
it's
of
just
all, Leviosa.
Okay, all right. You little Hermione over here. Swear to God.
All right.
Anyway.
Well, I would like to announce the top 5 patrons, but I would like for either one of you to choose the character in which they are announced.
Danny DeVito.
Yes.
Oh God. Let me try. I can't. I don't know.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Come on, Sydney. Do it for the patrons.
Channel Danny DeVito. Channel your inner Danny DeVito.
Top 5 patrons. Oops, all singularity. Dingleberry Jackson, Kalivi Helvetti, Brian Zupke, J.A. Carlton, and honorable mention Casey Kickendall.
That was pretty good. Can you say, can I offer you an egg in these trying times for me?
Can I offer you an egg in these trying times?
Okay, that's pretty good. I'll accept it.
Terrible. This is why I am not an actress. I am just myself. But thank you to everyone who gives to us on Patreon. Once again, we could not make this happen without people like you donating to a great cause. So, I mean, in my opinion, a great cause. I'm a little biased. Maybe it's a great cause to you guys too, I think. But please, if you have the means, consider supporting us at tiny.cc/Patreon. TH. That goes to Talk Heathen. On that note, we've also started recording the Talk Heathen Discord after show for all levels of paid patrons. So if you want more content and a more informal look, you can join Patreon today and find us on there and get some access to exclusive content. But that being said, I think
We
we're
have a
gonna
super chat. Super chat.
we do. I'm so glad you pointed that out. We have another super chat. Connor K9 for $5 said, "Great show, guys. 100." Also, this is the Connor you've talked to. Okay, that's the Connor I've talked to. Hopefully we can talk again at the ACD. Yeah. I definitely knew I talked to a Connor. The other Connor we spoke to, their voice sounds so familiar. It's going to make me insane. I know I've talked to that person before, but I've definitely talked to this Connor as well. Thank you for clarifying that. That was going to keep me awake at night. And then Nero for $2 says, "Teach a kid magician tricks, awe, and understanding." Love that. Love that for them. Absolutely. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with pretending to believe in magic. I don't think there's anything wrong with the idea of it. It's the literal, actual belief and living your life around the idea that magic is real and it controls everything or whatever. I've heard all sorts of types that I think becomes a problem.
The ratio of atheists to like magicians is like kind of ridiculous, actually. At least for notable public figures that happen to be both. I don't know why that's the case, but it kind of is.
Because I think they're like, if people are going to walk around believing this stuff, they might as well believe this and pay me to do it. They might as well. Maybe it's
that's a very mercenary approach, but I guess that could be the motivation for some of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that is I think we're going to call it. I think we're going to wrap up the show here and we're going to give it our love rings. The love rings like work sometimes when I do this. Let's give it some love rings.
This is magic kind of, because we don't always have a clear idea of how it works.
Love rings.
They're not working right now. You got to charge it up.
All free
charge it up, Sydney.
Charge it up.
Charge it up.
Yes, so please, if you have time, check us out on tiny.cc/ACD Discord. We record those, and if you join us on Patreon and you miss one of the Discord chats, you can catch us there. But if you don't believe, this is your community, and we really appreciate you being here. And if you do believe, we don't hate you at all.
We're just not convinced.
Not convinced.
Whoa.
Not convinced. Imaginary love rings. Pretend you can see them.
Invisible love rings.
Maybe I'll just...
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.